Well, shalom, my homies. How you guys doing? I hope you're living courageously. Man, I'm having a fantastic, exciting day, and I just wanted to share something that I found that I was so pumped on. I was finishing up on one side of things. I was finishing up one of these books that I had a final little section to read on the underground history of American education, and he was diving into utopianism, and these ideologies that just permeated culture and just destroyed what we held so dearly in this country for so long. And I was like, every time I read these stories, I think about if somebody had been alive that had chronicled the details of the history of Israel a little more specifically at certain times. Like there are some moments in history that you just go, man, I wish I could just go back and see that a little bit more, because you get breadcrumbed some of these like concepts and ideas about like crazy, ridiculous stories. And you're like, I want to know what that looked like. Like, what did it actually look like? And there's this guy in Second Chronicles. He's other places in the Bible, but I'd like to read it. If you read like the history of Israel, the nation of Israel, and the nation of Yehuda, there's some crazy moments with the kings that's like more insane than anything you can even imagine, because it's just like you're sitting there reading this and you're like, how is this possible that it could goes from like powerful, incredible moments of like, whoa, awesome miracles to like the people running straight to the idols. You're like, what the heck? How is it like these idols? How is it they have such a stronghold on the hearts of men? And it's because, and I'm convinced more and more, it's because we lack an accurate historical understanding of idolatry, fundamentally. Like we just lack an understanding of it. And so when we read these accounts, I think we're just, every single time we read them, we think about some silver and gold statue thing. And we don't understand that there were real transformations that happened in the world and in like the environment around them. There was like terraforming by these mighty ones. These immortals have the power to change things around them, to enact their will on this earth, and to make it appear to be truthful. When these prophecies or these oracles, like we've talked about the oracles at Delphi that were in Corinth, like these were real historical figures that had a power to foretell the future, divination, right? They actually had these powers and these abilities. And these are things that are documented in history, not just in the accounts of the scriptures, but outside accounts. Like other historical texts will describe people going up to the oracle at Delphi and them giving them prophecies to kings in particular, and those coming to pass. And so these are things that like you've got to critically examine and understand. There wasn't for no reason that people went and engaged in this stuff. But there's a character in here who also has this incredible love for the soil that I just loved. And so those are a couple things I just want to hit on today, because on one side, his dad just does a doofus, like an unbelievable doofus level of stupid move. And later on, like you got to understand how much that's going to impact your children. Like our children are going to see us at our awesome, and they're going to see us at our not so awesome. Like you want to just, let's just relive a moment of my not so awesome. Okay, I'm going to share with you guys just you go back a year in time. You can see the Reynolds in their not so awesome phase. Like you can watch this on our end of the road videos, and you can watch this on like the Reynolds rerouted. Like we used to have a series called Rolling with the Reynolds when the Reynolds were traveling in our RV all the time, and it was upbeat. Chelsea would do these jazzy musics and stuff, and it was like, oh yeah, vlogging looking videos. And then it was just unutterably like brutal at times too. But that all came to the end last year when we had just an outbreak of mold in our RV, and my wife was dying, and it came cataclysmically to its end. And then my wife gave birth to twins, and it was like, oh my gosh, we didn't know we were going to have twins. I've talked about this part before. Those of you that are new to this channel, though, I've got a whole recommended reading section on my website, snatchedfromtheflames.com. I'm not the best at promoting any of my stuff on that or whatever, but you can go there. There's all the videos that we have are hosted there as well. And my book is there, audiobook, ebook, but all the audio scriptures, you can download those right there. But I have a resources page tab, and you can look at all the recommended reading books. This one was just like, oh my gosh, a weapon in our arsenal. This is called Home Birth on Your Own Terms, a how-to guide for birthing unassisted. And this is written by Heather Baker. This book literally is what I was flipping through a year ago as my wife was on day 3 of labor. Day 3 of labor. There's definitely some like pictures in here of women actively giving birth. So be warned. It's real life. It's authentic, but just understand that. But so I'm not going to flip through and show you a whole bunch of stuff. But I was literally like desperately seeking the pages of this for counsel. I was like, oh my gosh. I had lots of time to prepare, you know? I had ample time to prepare. We never had an ultrasound. We never went to a midwife. My wife and I had a real desire to experience birth without the confines of a birth center because we had done that for our two previous children. And we wanted to be able to share with people the journey of what it was like to do home birth, because the previous ones had been at a birth center, both of which had had a midwife that had on one occasion. My wife tells this whole story, by the way. If you guys want to watch our whole birth story, I highly recommend it. It's an incredible journey called unassisted Deliverance Has Come, our unassisted birth story. Now, that was an amazing video that I really encourage you guys to go check out, even if you're like not even into the birth thing at all. Just understand there's an incredible testimony that's waiting there when you step out in faith and you get to see the Father provide miracles beyond mention. And that was a season of it. But we also had the assistance of people's wisdom from beforehand. But I'll tell you what, man, if any time in my life where I had this desperate cramming season, that was it, because I suddenly was in this desperate need to understand what to do. We had believed that the Father gave us peace, that we did not need a midwife. We had a lot of people asking us, like, people even were willing to pay for us to get a midwife, and I was like, could you just help us buy a van instead? We needed a van. We didn't need a midwife. People are like, no, we don't want to watch your wife die and all this other stuff. Anyways, during the course of that, though, I tell you what, I have never in my life been so desperate to try to learn about something as fast as I possibly could. And you know what? There's these seasons in life where it's like that, where we suddenly realize we are at an absolute deficit of information. And there is this incredible pearl of wisdom sitting here that we need to glean through with absolute desperation to be able to find that and find the answers to those questions that we just need to know, like right now. And, it was that level of hunger and that level of intensity that I had during that moment that I was like beyond thankful that someone had handed this book to my wife, because as she was struggling to like go into labor all the way, like she wasn't accelerating. She would, rise up at night and be in a lot more intense labor, and then it would diminish a little bit in the morning. And she had had 3 days and 3 nights of labor with Naomi before. So we were familiar. This was a possibility. But this book had a whole section in here on medicines, right? She's got a lot of testimonials, like individual stories about how it went, the complications too, the good, the bad, the ugly, all sides of it. She's got a whole section on book references, but then she had, let me just show you this part, which was what was most critical for me at the time. When baby is not positioned in the right way, right? Oh, there it is. This one, you can see. This is a section that was on remedies, right? On like herbal medicinals that are literally in our toolkit. And so we had built together like this birthing tote to be like ready to rock for that occasion. And we had a lot of these that are in here. These are things like shepherd's purse, rescue remedy, skullcap, valerian, yellow dock, which we didn't use, red raspberry, nettle, motherwort, licorice root, lobiella, mother's milk tea. She's even got marijuana in here. I know that's complex and convoluted for a lot of you guys. Just hang in there. Cotton root, dandelion, echinacea, femitrol, ginger, gelesmium. Never heard of that one. Fenugreek. These are all different things that are used not just during labor, but during different seasons and times about it. But it just goes on for pages. This is one of those little things that you come across and you're like, wow, we need to prepare with this. And so we had like this medicinal tote, and literally it was in the middle of like after Chelsea gave birth to Pearl. And we gave her Angelica, which is supposed to help with uterine contractions for the placenta to get delivered. Well, then my wife ended up giving birth to a son, and I caught him in a copper basin because I thought it was going to be a placenta. My wife was like, "Get the copper basin, baby!" And I was like, "You got it." So I caught my son in a copper basin, which is why his name is Kior, which is like the Hebrew word for the basin where the priests would go wash their feet. The women melted down their mirrors of vanity that they brought with them from Egypt, and they like melted them down as an offering, and they gave them to the priests, and they cast a copper basin for them to wash themselves, their hands and feet before they went into the tabernacle. It's amazing. It was absolutely amazing. But then my wife was bleeding, not hemorrhaging, but just bleeding some. So I gave her shepherd's purse, which is a plant that's like outside in abundance. It's a weed, And I was just like so thankful to have had that book and those resources available to me in that moment. And as I was reading through Second Chronicles, it describes a moment like that where this is what a king, he started out with that level of desperate hunger for Yahuwah, a desperate need for him to answer him, to lead him, to guide him, and to direct him. And because of that, his kingdom was literally established. But then you also will see a deviation from it. And like over and over again, you can go through the scriptures and you will find this pattern where the people will have this pressing pain, need, desperation, this pressing absolute hunger for help. And then you'll see the provision, the deliverance come and the breakthrough come. And then you'll see the waning off effect. And, I'm not trying to sit here and say that I haven't been just as guilty of this at so many times in my life, because there's something that is so bent in us to forget the mighty acts of Yahuwah, to forget his wondrous works, that we forget what like the Most High has done in our life. And then we move on, And everything in this world is set up, like we talk about all the time, with the landmines to draw us away. Those elemental spirits that are active in the world, trying to draw men astray. They're so powerful. They're so intoxicating. And you know what? That's the very same idols that the people had to contend with before them, And in times of desperation, it's easier for us to turn to him. But in times of prosperity, it's much harder. And you know what? This is why we must remember, those of you that are in one of those hard times, those of you that are in those desperations, rejoice in it. Because listen, your hunger for cultivating that love of the word, your love for the prayer, your love for disciplines of righteousness tend to be much higher than when it's easy and when it's not so arduous, So let's go, if you guys have Second Chronicles. I know a lot of you ask every time. The scriptures translation, the ISR scriptures translation, is what I read from. And I have all the audio recordings for that listed in the description below. So if you want to wash your mind in the water of the word, dive in. Wow, that is strong tea. There's a lot of raspberry leaf and rosemary. Rosemary. It's supposed to be good for the brain. Those of you guys that are like, you have so much energy. I'm like, Yalpan. Check it out. Yalpan, rosemary, basil. What else is in there? Stinging nettle, oodles of it. I drink crazy, insane amounts of wild plants just shoved inside a pot of boiling water, steeped for an incredibly long time. There you go. Enjoy it. All right, jump on in here, guys. Second Chronicles. What's this, 24? Yeah, son, let's do it. This is so frustrating. Yoash, so this is, by the way, two houses, right? We got Israel, that's one kingdom, 10 tribes-ish hanging out over here, and then the house of Judah down below it. This is important. So as you hear Yehuda, that's the tribe of Judah. We're not talking about the Jews. We're talking about Yehuda. They're distinct. I understand. That's going to be perplexing for some of you guys, but there's a modern-day version of it that's very different than the version that we have from the scriptures. Something to consider. You should read the book of Maccabees and get a better idea of what it is that they're all about. Anyways, chapter 24. Joash, or Joash, maybe in your Bibles, guys. Joash was 7 years old when he began to reign, and he reigned 40 years in Jerusalem. And the name of his mother was Zibiah of Beersheba. Okay, you 7-year-olds that are watching right now, I hope you just take a second and understand something. He's king. 7-year-olds, king. How many of you would look at your 7-year-old right now and be like, you know what? You could do it. I got you. You're ready for it. You're ready for it. How many of you have raised up your child as if they're ready to become king at 7 years old? This, why do we lack the mentality when raising up our children to try to raise them up to be ready to run a nation by the time they're 7 or 8 or 9 years old? We have that because we don't look at them in the same way as people have looked at children through history. They understood that children were to be little adults as soon as possible, very, very young. And they gave them opportunities and responsibilities early on. The more responsibilities you can give your children early on, the better it is for them. Give them opportunities to fail and succeed constantly. Let them experience challenges and trials. There's this, he made a mention of this in The Underground History of American Education by John Taylor Gatto. He said it really well. He articulated it very well when he described it like this. Oh, man. Because they had to systemically move parents away from an idea of raising your children as your own, and they had to move them into being institutionalized, and they had to systemically break from parents the attachment that they had to being participants in the rearing up of their children, and they had to take that and move it into the state. And it was a very deliberate process that was not easy. But he has it right here. If you guys have this book, you can turn to page 226. This is in his chapter called The Irony, or the subsection of the chapter called The Lure of Utopia. And this is the irony of the safety lamp. Have I made too much of this? What on earth is wrong with wanting to help people, even in institutionalizing the helping urge so it becomes more reliable? Just this. The helping equation is not as simple as utopians imagined. I remembered the shock I felt on many occasions when my well meant intercession into obvious problems a kid was having were met with some variation of the angry cry, "Leave me alone!" as if my assistance actually would have made things worse. It was baffling how often that happened. And I was a well liked teacher. Is it possible that there are hills that nature or God demands we climb alone or become forever the less for having been carried over them? The plans of true believers for our lives may well be better than our own when judged against some abstract official standard, but to deny people their personal struggles is to render existence absurd. What are we left with what are we left with then besides some unspeakable Chautauqua, a liar's world which promises that if only the rules are followed, good lives will ensue. Inconvenience, discomfort, hurt, defeat, and tragedy are inevitable accompaniments of our time on earth. We learn to manage trouble by managing trouble, not by turning our burden over to another. Think of the mutilated spirit that victims of overprotective parents carry long after they are grown and gone from the home. What should make you suspicious about school is its relentless compulsion. Why should this rich, brawling, utterly successful nation ever have needed to resort to compulsion to push people into school classes, unless advocates of forced schooling were driven by peculiar philosophical beliefs not commonly shared? Another thing should concern you that the consequences of orthodox mass schooling have never been fully thought through. To show you what I mean, consider the example of Sir Humphrey Davy, inventor of the coal mine safety lamp. After an 1812 explosion in which 92 boys and men were killed, Davy's assignment to honor the honor roll of saintliness came from his assertion that the sole object of his concern was to serve the cause of humanity, a declaration made credible by his refusal to patent the device. Let nobody deny that the safety lamp decreased the danger of explosion relative to the older methods of illumination. But the brutal fact is that many more miners died because of Davy's invention. It allowed the coal industry to grow rapidly, bringing vastly more men into the mines than before, opening deeper tunnels, exposing miners to mortal dangers, of which fire damp is only one, dangers for which there's no protection. Davy's safety lamp brought safety only in the most ironic sense. It was a profit enhancement lamp, most of all. Its most prominent effect was to allow the growth of industry, a blessing to some and a curse to others, but far from an unambiguous good, because it wasted more lives than it saved. Serving the cause of humanity through forced government schooling may also turn out to be a stranger matter than it appears. Another Davy lamp in different costume. I think that is absolutely brilliant. And he has another point in here where he describes as some of the catalyst reasons to the demise of our country. And one of them, one of the most important conditions of it, he said, which was just awesome. This was a little bit earlier in the chapter on page 212. He said, producing artificial wants. Beginning about 1840, a group calling itself the Massachusetts School Committee held a series of secret discussions involving many segments of New England political and business leadership. Stimulus for these discussions, often led by the political Horace Mann, was the deterioration of family life that the decline of agriculture was leaving in its wake. This comes from a section where he says the decline of American agriculture was part of a movement to replicate the centralized pattern found in Britain, which had deliberately destroyed its own small farm holdings by 1800. Agriculture had been conducted on a capitalist basis in Britain since the notorious enclosure movement prompted by the growth of farming. In its first stage, peasants were displaced to make room for large-scale pasture farming. This second displacement transformed the small farmer into the farm hand or a factory worker. Capitalist farming was established in Britain side by side with a growing manufacturing industry, which made it possible to rely on the import of foodstuffs from abroad. Freely imported food meant cheap food. Cheap food meant cheap labor. The development of factory farming in America and Australia provided an outlet for the investment of surplus capital at good rates of interest. Hence, the decline of small farming in America was hastened considerably by direct inducements from its former motherland. Although as late as 1934, 33% of American employment was still in agriculture versus 7% in Great Britain. The curriculum of small farm, which encouraged resourcefulness, independence, and self reliance, was fast giving way to the curriculum of government education, which called for quite a different character. And fundamentally, y'all, that is the exact crux of the issue. They targeted the love of agriculture. They targeted the heart of this nation, which was independent agriculturalists. This used to be, when you think about 33% of the people in your life, 33% of the people that you have known, how many of them are actively involved in agriculture? How many, right? Therefore, we are much closer to that 7% figure. We're closer to that 10%, 7% figure of what Great Britain was at that time. And as that nation got driven out of agriculture, especially on small scale farms, the vast majority of all farms are over small scale in the United States, I believe is defined as less than 100 acres. So if you have less than 100 acres, you're thrown into the small farm category, right? Everything today, there's more acreage being managed by fewer farmers today than ever before, and that's the trend. The goal for so much of this utopian esoteric secret society's agenda to take over the world is to consolidate power out of the hands of the many and to put it into the hands of the few, those that are deemed by the utopians to be the best utopians. Another way of saying that is the best psychopaths are able to run the world, right? This is how the beast system is rewarding those who are being most made into the image and likeness of the beast. As they do that, they get rewarded with a reciprocity of power. And they are the ones who are divining ways of controlling people through smaller amounts of oversight, that they don't physically need to be in the room, but they're creating hierarchies of power so that it's collectively enforced, right? This is why they can push something through a mandate that people will enact as if it's a law, right? They're literally ripping people's power out of their hands, but they're doing it gently. And that's so much more effective. It's very much the mechanisms of the Black Robe priests, the Jesuits, and a lot of these fraternal orders that have been doing this all across the world for many, many centuries. Now, as you see that ripping away of families who are experiencing farm life, you're seeing this insulation from risk. You're seeing an insulation from hazards, from troubles, from difficulties. Because when you are outside and you're participant in trying to raise up your own food, you're trying to raise up the things that you need, whether it's clothing, like just my children learning how to sew. My wife, first of all, had to learn how to sew. That's like why we have the whole becoming a Linenite, the Linden Railroad stuff. It was because these were the catalysts starting to grind our own grain and make our own bread, taking care of our own clothing, mending clothing, making tailoring clothing. Like,
You need to really make sure
Mama,
you
what are you
drop me on the
making?
floor. Some rice packs,
We have
which
rice
are little
packs.
heating pads.
And you heat them up in the oven. Here's one that we've finished.
And there's the other one. It's mine.
And there's
Can you grab me the other one? Where's
there's
yours?
that one. Mine is right here. The one under it.
Right there.
Here's one that's already finished. We made a while ago. But we put too much rice in it.
It's mom's.
Don't interrupt.
These were the catalysts that began to drive us into these experiences of our ancestors that beforehand we were so divorced from, we were so insulated from, that we had no real connection. So when we'd read stories about this stuff, we'd be like, "Oh, that's very romantic. It's very romantic to read the Little House on the Prairie book until you're the one doing laundry without electricity." And then it's a lot less romantic when you're doing laundry in a bucket. That tends to be the one that breaks a lot of people that are like trying to cut in raw land or trying to do the homestead thing. I'll just tell you right now, laundry, the washing machine is one of those tools that you cannot even imagine how different your life is without it. We did not have a washer for 4 years. Like it was either laundromats or trying to do it by yourself. And it is crazy. It's crazy. We tried all kinds of different devices over the years, but you realize that's one of those things that just can rock your world is a laundry machine. Anyways, I'm getting lost in the weeds here, but I'm starting to see so many of those connections and the parallels to the experiences that I got to have by living on small scale farms, by growing food alongside people. Like we got to experience incredible lessons of trials and tribulations that we couldn't have had any other way, but it made me also develop a sense of hardiness. My children have a sense of perseverance because they've had to deal with stuff that's difficult. Animals are inherently difficult. Like a horse has more time to peck at a gate than you can even imagine. Like a horse will spend 5 hours just jockeying the gate. Like what's he talking about here? In Polyface Micro, he has one of the best descriptions I've ever seen about how persistent animals are. This is by Joel Salatin. He has a section in here all about fencing. Gosh, I can't even read it enough to you guys. I have probably 20 hours of footage of me trying to build a fence from down in Texas. I got to just put it out and you will watch me darn near lose my mind. I had never put up a fence like that. I think we fenced in on that section was like 27 acres to put it through. Yeah, try cutting through. Jeez, it is brutal. Stinking limestone hill country of Texas. Savage. I'm going to read just this little section here when he talked about just trials that come your way when trying to leave a homestead or try to like step away for a second. This is the stuff that you grow up with on a farm or on a homestead that you can never really understand unless you do it, you know? And this is hilarious. He has a section in here called Inexperienced Babysitters. These are his biggest pitfalls that he starts the book out right away with just giving you the good, the bad, and the ugly of success with the livestock and on homestead scale. Invariably, the homesteader family wants to go away for a couple of days. The looming question is this: who do we know who can watch our place while we go away? More often than not, it's some friend who doesn't have a clue about animals or running a homestead. The owner leaves for their getaway, and the fun begins. Murphy's Law strikes first. Anything that can go wrong will, at the worst possible moment. When does the electric fence charger quit working? Answer: when the taillights of the owner's car disappear from the driveway. When does the latch to the grain room get left open so the goats can enter? When does the raccoon get in the chicken coop? When does the pig find the hole in the fence? All this happens when the babysitters come to watch the homestead. If I've solicited disaster stories surrounding this one pitfall, I'm sure I could fill several volumes. The stories at once are hilarious and tragic. Most of them you wouldn't wish on your worst enemy. One of our most dramatic story involved two very capable apprentices. They were not novices, but good grief, what are the chances? Our family decided to go to Texas for a week. Barely had we gotten in the air when a terrific windstorm came up. By the time we landed for our first connection, the apprentices called. The cover blew off the hoop house. We had 1,000 chickens in there. It was winter. Snow was on the way. Who could imagine such a catastrophe within minutes of leaving home? My wife Teresa says that the electric fence energizer is plugged into me. When I leave, it quits working. I wish I had an explanation for this strange phenomenon, but I don't. Perhaps it's cosmic humor. The fact is, when you leave your homestead, things go haywire. You can prepare, you can do a checklist, you can pray. When you leave, the gremlins start messing with your homestead. It never fails. The pitfall here is being flippant about the fact that things are going to go wonky. They will. That means you need to train your babysitter. You need someone who comes over for days, even weeks to learn the ropes. You need to do some drills. What would you do if the cows were over there instead of here where they're supposed to be? You might even set them up, like cutting a hole in the hose to create a leak. See if they notice it. See if they know how to fix it. Believe me, groundhogs that can't find your water hose for a year will suddenly discover it the day you leave on that coveted getaway. Don't lose your homestead and your sanity during a short getaway. Compliments of a novice babysitter. Put in the time to make sure your babysitter can see, think, and act. Your homestead depends on it. That's the mentality of what gets cultivated in you in a land of opposition, a land of troubles, right? It's what you do not get in classrooms that are perpetually climate controlled and where you're forced to do a segmented form of schooling on things that you don't really want to learn about. Like you can never teach a child something they don't want to learn. But as soon as they have the desire, as soon as it's actually there, man, they can run with it and absorb information at a collective rate that's beyond your wildest imagination. And that's what you got to work with. We got to try to do everything we can to make the kingdom fascinating, to make living authentically wonderful. Like we are trying to offer to the world an alternative reality. The reality that they are being given, it is given to them through people who are devotees of a religious ideology that is so far counter to what the word has given to us that it truly is another God. It's another immortal. It's a kingdom, the God of this age. That's who doing everything he can to mesmerize the nations. He is doing everything he can to entertain them, to woo them, to wow them. Like he describes it in here brilliantly. He calls it how they could get the allegiance, for people to have the allegiance to corporations and to the government. How do you get people to be willing to demand it, right? He literally goes back and he describes it this way. The first real mention of this, a lot of this starts up in the 1840s, I think, when the Watchers were released, you guys, from their prison cells. Just saying. No, not everyone agrees, but this back on continuing on that section where he's talking about agriculture and the demise of it. And yet, at the same time, a great opportunity was presented. Plato, Augustine, Erasmus, Luther, Calvin, Hobbes, Rousseau, and a host of other insightful thinkers, sometimes referred to as the Boston Athenaeum, the Order of the Quest, here comes those stinking orders, all taught that without compulsory universal schooling, the idiosyncratic family would never surrender its central hold on society to allow utopia to become a reality. Family had to be discouraged from its function as a sentimental haven, pressed into the service of loftier ideals, those of the perfected state. Man saw that society's guards and securities had to be increased because an unsuspected pathological phenomenon was following the introduction of mass production into life. It was producing artificial wants. It was multiplying the temptation to accumulate things, but the barbarous life of the machine laborer made family ideals a hollow mockery. Morality could no longer be taught morality could no longer be taught by such families. Crime and vice were certain to explode unless children could be pried away from their degraded custodians and civilized according to formulas laid down by the best minds. Barnas Sears, Mount's Calvinist colleague, saw the rapid growth of commercial mass entertainment catering to dense urban settlements as the current of sensuality sweeping everything before it. The former bucolics who once looked to nature for entertainment were now pawns in the hands of worldly wise men vending commercial amusement. Urban confinement robbed men and women of their ability to find satisfaction outside of the titillation of mechanical excitation. Whoever provided excitement became the master. That single paragraph is the exact protocol to enthrone a new immortal over mankind. That is literally how they did it. They're like, okay, we are going to get people into consolidations of city urbanization, right? To drive people away from rural life. If you draw that circle outside of your condensed cities and you take it 30 minutes outside of it, then you take it an hour outside of it, then you take it 2 hours outside of it, right? Or 3 hours. That ruralness, right? They sought to find ways to drive people in. This is exactly what Nimrod and Semiramis, right? Easter, you guys are thinking about and participating in. This is how they consolidated power into the heart of Babylon. This is what Babylonianism, this is how they function. When you look at people like that, that comes from ideals, a religion of Babylonianism. If you are not familiar with it, you've been trained up by people that are practitioners of this, people like the Rosicrucians. They brought this esoteric doctrine into mankind. They popularized it through people that had a veneer of secularism, but inside they were mystics. And they were the ones who used these publishing agencies to promote the ideology and then to finance it behind the scenes so that they could literally get people out of those countries where they couldn't control them and counties where they couldn't control them, consolidate them into the cities. But what happens when you stack and pack people into these environments is they need some kind of outlet. And that's where entertainment, mechanical entertainment, was chosen as the tool to keep people from going crazy. Because if you don't find a way to do that, like when you think about how they told everyone to sit and stay safe, stay like dogs for a year. They're like, you stay right there. How they could have never pulled that off 15 years beforehand, because we didn't all have Netflix on demand and streaming networks on demand. We didn't have Amazon delivering Prime to our doors. We didn't have so many of those same on-demand resources delivered to our door to entertain us and to occupy us. We didn't have the same access to those things even 100 years ago. So they can't advance this agenda, you guys, without making sure to build out the framework for entertaining the masses, which is why I'm readily convinced there is not going to be power outages and internet outages whole scale, because this tool that they use through propaganda and to get information out and to control the masses is far more valuable with the power on than it is when it's off. They work really hard to restore power to areas because during crisis, because they want to make sure people get the right narrative anytime. They want to make sure people have access to the mouth speaking mockingbird people every time they want it. These are those trends that you can begin to analyze and see that allowed them to just so effectively destroy humanity, so effectively destroy autonomy and self-sufficiency. But if you can even carve out for yourself a tiny pocket of nature, however big or small it is, you guys, there are tiny reservoirs of nature that will come to the surface everywhere. And you know what? The beauty of going out and planting some seeds, like I'm a fanatic for wild seeding, guerrilla seeding, you can take a salt shaker or a little spice jar, you guys, buy bulk seeds of plants that you like to eat, and you can throw them in that spice shaker. And as you're walking around on trails, on paths, wherever you go, you can be sprinkling those things out, you guys, and just wild put stuff out in the forest and in the land and see what's going to grow, see what's going to come along. Because you know what? You can put real food everywhere. And it creates this experiment where you're like, wow, I wonder what's going to happen. It creates hope because you're redeeming areas that have been taken over and they've been trying to shoved into this control mechanism. And you know what? You're rewilding them. And it creates this wonderful journey and excitement because you don't know what's going to happen. You don't know what's going to be fertile and what's going to be fruitful. And it's so fun to be able to do that. You can plant trees. Like I planted 500 trees last week. 500 trees, all seeds. I have no idea how many of them are going to go or not go, but like I carry these seeds across the country with me. And I'm like, I'm going to the Appalachians. I'm going to take some of my favorite trees, Ozark orange, Osage orange, not Ozark orange, Osage orange, the Bodark, the bright golden wood of glory. I love that thing. And I'm like, I'm taking you with me and I'm going to plant hedges everywhere I go because it's awesome. It's like the most incredible wood I've ever had. It's the best bow wood on the earth. Anyways, it's the Ark of the Covenant wood, obviously. Don't believe that acacia nonsense. They just made that up. They're like, there's 800 varieties of acacia. We bet you that's acacia. Anyways, you guys, there's all kinds of things they don't really know about. They speculate. Like even the version of the Tabernacle you've all been given. Come on, I got a book here. I'm going to blow your mind for a second. You know how your whole life you've been brainwashed to think the Tabernacle was some really boring, exhaustingly small rectangle shoved in the wilderness? They're like, hey, here's the Tabernacle. There you go. Isn't that awesome? It's a rectangle. Glory to Yah. No, it's not. You know what? Every single version of it that you've ever seen, this is the stuff that just blows your mind. You realize that you're like, everybody's lying. Not everybody. Just a lot of people. They're like, okay, this is what the Tabernacle looks like. You can see it. Here's another version. This is another version that was depicted, right? A-frames. This is, sorry, for those of you that don't know, this is the book that's called The House of El Shaddai by Andrew Hoy. I cannot recommend his website, Project 314, enough. Project314.org. Right there. Let's see. Project314.org. This is amazing. That's the version of the tabernacle when you actually take the dimensions of and the specific instructions on everything and use it all. All the other versions that you've seen that have been given, they're like, oh, we recreated the tabernacle. Here's a scale model of it. Every one of them that you've ever seen is not true to the actual instructions of what Moses had. Every single one of them does not use every single part and every single piece to the dimensions that they were given. Not one of them. Every one of them has to change things and modify it because it's not structurally sound and it doesn't work. And so they're like, well, we'll just make a few tweaks. But Moses was told, hey, you build this thing exactly the way I tell you. Don't deviate from it. It says he saw in the heavenlies and he came down with an exact blueprint and told to build it. And then that's what he did. He set it up according to those plans. I'm trying to find, there's a recreation version of this you can see over in Israel. The people have, there it is. This is one that people have set up. You know what's going to happen if you go ahead and have fire and incense burning in there day and night? You're going to create mold through all those layers of fabric that they just stacked on top of each other because they're like, well, we don't know what to do with all this extra fabric. You could pitch a tent, pitch a tent. That's what it was made to do. 6 stories tall. It's beautiful. Anyways, I highly encourage you guys to go check it out. He's got a lot of other resources in detailing how it goes. Maybe I'll just show you the very end page too. So cool. Oh, there it is. That's a close-up of the version that you get all the time too. You're like, yeah, you're going to have major problems trying to have a fire in there all the time. Smoke can't do that. Versus this. Boom. Glowing like a light bulb. Who can light a lamp and put it under a bowl? Come on. This thing would glow at night for all the nations to see. Fire of Yah coming down. Changes your perspective on the story, doesn't it? Anyways, I don't even remember why I got on there. But tabernacle story. Absolutely phenomenal. See, he has a little, he had another section in here on showing the basics of people doing these trades of like the process of making linen, the process of making wool, the tanners, the hewers of wood, right? Like the actual skills of what it took for people to be able to build this thing back then versus the today. This book is absolutely awesome. And those of you that are doing homeschooling, those of you that are doing lessons, like there is so much that you can teach your children. We're going to try to start doing like a homeschool series as well, because we realize how valuable it'd be to have more material. Like we're going to just focus in on a specific topic or a specific plant or specific way of growing and food and all this stuff. We're going to just have a little series of breakouts over the summer. That's going to be the big project that we're trying to do, because we just realize like we have to try to filter through all of this nonsense and garbage with curriculums. Those of you that don't have children, just hang on, tuck this away because it might be incredibly valuable to you later on in life and just something to consider. But to be able to like accumulate a library for yourself of valuable resources that you can share with others is incredibly important, because even today, the digital versions of books that we have get altered. Like there's even the text. There's another version of the scripture Bible that I have, not with me here, but it's called the Sefer et Sefer. And even it has a digital version of the app. And I have the second edition of the Sefer, and I can see hundreds and hundreds of changes that have taken place between then and now, and not all of them for the good. You know what I'm saying? And this is just one version of a digital book versus others. And so having a physical on-hand book that you can reference and show to people in person that you can validate, hey, this is why this is this way, like it's really incredibly important to be able to do that and to train others up with that, and this is what one of the things that the kings were supposed to have with them was a personally written copy of the Torah. Every king, it was commanded in the Torah that they were to write out a copy of the Torah when they became king. Like, welcome, you're king. Like Joash. They're like, hey, you're 7. You're a king. He's supposed to sit down and write a copy of the Torah, the instructions of Yahuwah. He was supposed to have that with him so he could consult it and to be able to verify, hey, is this thing good or not good? And you literally get to a point in the story where they are so far lost into this world of idolatry and a mixture of other pantheistic ideas, and they've got all these other religious pursuits that have injected themselves into what they believe, that they have literally no regard for the Torah. The Torah gets thrown away and is lost, and they're like, we don't even know what you're talking about. It gets discovered later on, and they're literally like, oh my gosh, everything we're doing is wrong. And you know what? That's like a lot of us who all our life we were raised, even if we were raised in the church, we woke up, some of us woke up one day and we're like, oh my gosh, everything I inherited, even in the church, was a bunch of garbage. I'm like, how much paganism did my pastor preach to me? Turns out a whole lot of it. And you're like, What the heck, dude? Yahuwah says, don't worship me the way the pagans do. And you're like, well, that means I got to throw out a bunch of garbage traditions of man. And you're like, yeah, but what did Yeshua come here to do? Throw out a bunch of garbage traditions of men that people had. It's nothing new, you guys. We fall prey to the same stupid snares of the devil all the time. Sorry, not stupid, brilliant snares of the devil. And you're going to see some with these kings. I'm going to read to you from 2 Chronicles 24, verse 2. And Joash did what was right in the eyes of Yahuwah all the days of Jehoiada the priest. And Jehoiada took for him 2 wives, and he brought forth sons and daughters. And after this, it came to be that Joash set his heart on restoring the house of Yahuwah. And he gathered the priests and the Levites and said to them, go out to the cities of Yehudah, gather from all of Yisrael silver to repair the house of Yahuwah your Elohim from year to year, and see that you hurry the matter. But the Levites did not hurry it. And the sovereign called Jehoiada, the chief, and said to them, why have you not required the Levites to bring in from Yehudah and from Jerusalem the levy of Moshe, the servant of Yahuwah, and of the assembly of Yisrael for the tent of the witness? For the sons of Athaliahu, that wrong woman, had broken into the house of Elohim and had also prepared all the set-apart vessels of the house of Yahuwah to the Baals. You see this, man? Every time, if you watch carefully, the enemy and his agents of evil on this earth, they seek to go into the houses of Yahuwah. That's where they want to be. They want to go in and they want to defile, which is why I've spent a lot of time talking to people about the satanic infiltration of the church. You must understand your enemy is a brilliant tactician, and he takes his people on this earth and he infects societies where the kingdom of Yah is active. He infects cultures where the kingdom is at its center point. And you know what? He interjects his doctrines into those places, his ideas. He puts his ideas into the minds of those people to lead them astray. And that is the strategy that we have seen. We have seen the deliberate destruction of absolute morality by putting it in the pulpits. They promote the pastors in so many, not in all circumstances, but in many cases, they promote the pastors that are better at getting people into the pews than they are at getting people into a place of absolute repentance. Because let me tell you, the word authentically spoken and preached to its fullness is not popular, but it's powerful. And you know what? We have to never seek. We have to do our utmost to try to guard against the methods that the enemy is trying to use in our life to grow it through his music. I mean, it's like one of those things I wrestle with when I see ministries promoting themselves or paying revenue, paying money to advertise. I personally don't follow that. I resist that, because to me, I'm like, shouldn't we let the word grow in accordance with how Yahuwah does it? Like, I believe my Father can grow it far more powerfully. He can raise up a ministry and he can bring it down. He can sow it to the ends of the earth and he can keep it very, very small. Like I see that modeled in the scriptures. I see that method of natural growth far more effective long term than the method that's artificial. Like you can get through that business model, and I'm speaking a lot of my experience, you guys, was growing up in the non-denominational Christianity, the corporate Christianity version where it was like a franchise Christianity. I saw a lot of that and the mechanisms of business being used to grow a brand. And so I experienced so much of how that system was used and how that system is really built on like a 2-year model where they can get lots of people hyped up about something and then it fizzles out because there's no long-term discipleship. There's no long-term change, transformation, but as people return with this hunger and seeing the ways of Yah, they begin to do the right thing, which is to examine the house of Yahuwah, which is our hearts, which is our lives. And you first must purge the idols from your life. You must purge the places where the ways of the world have infected you, which is where the enemy has gone to set up his house. He's gone to set up his kingdom inside there. And you know what? That's ultimately what most of us are battling with is first rooting out and cleansing out the heart. And this is what fundamentally Joash was amazing at, was he identified, wow, I've got to clean the house of Yah before I can really clean up the nation as a whole. This is back in verse 8. So the sovereign commanded, and they made a chest and set it outside the house of Yahuwah, at the gate of the house of Yahuwah, and made it known in Yehudah and in Jerusalem to bring to Yahuwah the levy that Moshe, the servant of Elohim, had imposed on Yisrael in the wilderness. And all the rulers and all the people rejoiced, and they brought in and put them into the chest to completion. And it came to be at that time when the chest was brought to the sovereign's official by the hand of the Levites, and when they saw that there was much silver, that the sovereign scribes and the high priest's officers came and emptied the chest and took it and returned it to its place. So they did this day by day and gathered a large amount of silver. And the sovereign of Jehoiada gave it to those who did the work of the service of the house of Yahuwah. And they hired stonemasons and carpenters to restore the house of Yahuwah, and also those who worked in iron and bronze to prepare the house of Yahuwah. And the workmen labored, and the work of restoration progressed in their hands, and they established the house of Elohim to its proper form and strengthened it. Ooh, they established the house of Elohim to its proper form and strengthened it. Come on, just something to consider here. Most of us received an improper form of the house of Elohim. Yahuwah loves tabernacles of skin. That's what he's all about. Don't you be scared about them setting up some fake third temple thing over there. Listen, the enemy wants to occupy your third temple. You're the temple of Yah, period. Don't, that stuff over there, the masquerading tourist show that's going on over there all the time. Listen, that's not the thing you got to worry yourself with, you guys. This area right here inside your body, your mind, your will, your emotions, your soul, that's the space that the enemy is seeking to occupy. That's the space that he's seeking to terraform and transform and destroy. That's it. The stuff over there is not where the abomination of desolation is getting set up. It's getting set up in you. Understand, that's why the enemy is doing everything he can to get people to be mesmerized so he can put them in them, the devices of the devil. That's the goal, you guys. The long-term goal is to set himself up in your mind and your soul and rule over you. Total, absolute mind control. That's if you have not understood what transhumanism is and the mixture of technology and machine, man and machine, and the desire for people to have absolute power, it's right there in the heart of man. It's going to come, you guys. It's been here a long time. It's going to become wholesale more popular. Check out my video called The Devices of the Devil. It's a good one. Alrighty, let's carry on. And Jehoiada was old. Let's go back to verse 14. And when they'd finished, they brought the rest of the silver before the sovereigns and Jehoiada, and they made utensils from it for the house of Yahuwah, utensils for serving and offerings. And they made utensils from it for the house of Yahuwah, utensils for serving and offering, ladles and vessels of gold and silver. And they offered ascending offerings in the house of Yahuwah continually all the days of Jehoiada. And Jehoiada was old and satisfied with days, and died 130 years old when he died. This is the priest, the high priest. And they buried him in the city of David among the sovereigns, for he had done good in Israel, both toward Elohim and his house. And after the death of Jehoiada, the rulers of Yehuda came and bowed themselves to the sovereign, and the sovereign listened to them. This is bad, you guys. And they forsook the house of Yahuwah Elohim of their fathers, and served the Asherim and the idols. And wrath came upon Yehuda and Jerusalem because of their trespass. And he sent prophets to them to bring them back to Yahuwah. And they witnessed against them, but they did not listen. Then the spirit of Elohim came upon Zechariah, the son of Jehoiada, the priest, who stood above the people and said to them, Thus said Elohim, why are you transgressing the commands of Yahuwah, and do not prosper? Because you have forsaken Yahuwah, he has forsaken you. And they conspired against him. And at the command of the sovereign, they stoned him with stones in the courtyard of the house of Yahuwah. Thus Joash the sovereign did not remember the loving commitment which Jehoiada his father had done to him, and killed his son. And as he died, he said, Yahuwah does see and repay. And it came to be at the turn of the year that the army of Aram came up against him, and they came into Yehuda and Jerusalem and destroyed all the rulers of the people from among the people, and sent all their spoil to the sovereign of Damasek. For the army of Aram came with few men, but Yahuwah gave a very great army into their hands, because they'd forsaken Yahuwah Elohim of their fathers. So they executed judgment against Joash. This is a brutal tragedy here at the end. Joash was literally sheltered. I didn't read in the chapter before this, but Jehoiada protected Joash when he was an infant from being assassinated by when there was a power struggle, right, for who wanted to rule over the kingdom, and a woman, the queen, took over. She took over, and she had all the sons of the previous king put to death, and Jehoiada hid away Joash. They hid him away in the house of Yahuwah. He literally grew up. Those first few years of his life was literally under the instructions of the great high priest and under all the priests. And he was hidden inside that place until he was established. And then Jehoiada led the insurrection to take back the kingdom for Jehoiada to have his throne established. That's why he was put into power at such a young age. And so here you are throughout his life. You see the good fruits of all of those horrible trials early on. But then you see him have this deliberate dedication to the house of Yahuwah towards purging out the idols and the evil. But then as soon as Jehoiada dies, the high priest, you see who comes in. You see this other subterfuge come in. You see that, come on. You see the Illuminati coming in. You guys, Johnny Cerrucci's fine, wonderful works, The Illuminati Unmasked by Johnny Cerrucci. You guys can examine these historical, incredible narratives to know how capable these other priests are at manipulating the rulers to establish the old gods again. That's all they are here to do. No matter what version of it they tell you, no matter what version of it they masquerade as, it's these counselors, like the doctrines, these guys who are like the servants of Balaam, the doctrines of Balaam that they have in their mouth. They will masquerade and shapeshift into any form they need to in order to advance this agenda to lead people astray and ultimately to establish these other gods. That's why we are being raised up into this society that's going to bring about the re-enchantment of these immortals. They will really get people to where all of them are deceived by lying signs and wonders. Go to Revelation, man. You got to read this. This is like, we have prophecies, accurate prophecies that are not coming from the mouth of demons to know for certain what's going to come to pass, so that we're not taken captive of it, so that we're not led astray by it. Listen to this. And I stood at the sand of the sea. This is Revelation 13. And I stood at the sand of the sea, and I saw a beast coming up out of the sea, having 7 heads and 10 horns, and on his 10 horns 10 crowns, and on his heads names of blasphemy. And the beast I saw was like a leopard, and his feet were like the feet of a bear, and his mouth like the mouth of a lion. And the dragon gave him his power and his throne and great authority. And I saw one of his heads as having been slain to death, and his deadly wound was healed. And all the earth marveled after the beast, and they worshipped the dragon, who gave authority to the beast. And they worshipped the beast, saying, "Who is like the beast? Who is able to fight with him?" And he was given a mouth speaking great matters and blasphemies. And he was given authority to do so 42 months. And he opened his mouth in blasphemies against Elohim, to blaspheme his name and his tent and those dwelling in heaven. And it was given to him to fight with the set apart ones and to overcome them. And authority was given to him over every tribe and tongue and nation, and all those dwelling on earth whose names have not been written in the book of life of the slain Lamb from the foundation of the world shall worship him. If anyone has an ear to hear, let him hear. He who brings into captivity shall go into captivity. He who kills with the sword has to be killed with the sword. Here is the endurance and the belief of the set apart ones. Listen, every time you hear that, man, you guys should be thinking about Hebrews 11 and the endurance of the belief of the set apart ones before us, the endurance of the prophets of old. Why we have this great cloud of witnesses in the scriptures for us to counsel with, for us to desperately come to and study, is so that we cannot be taken captive by this great deception. It's so carefully plotted and planned and prepared. It's so infectious, and it will be so beautiful that the whole world will wander towards it, wonder for it, demand it, desire it, inherently need it in their life. And you know what? Faithful endurance amidst suffering, amidst testing, is what produces those incredible, bold fruits of righteousness. Like, It's the trees. It's like every one of us that wants to try to insulate ourselves from all of the struggles and the difficulties. We are like people who plant trees and shove a stake in the ground and tie the tree to the stake in the ground. Listen, when a tree is blowing in the breeze, it's producing hormones that tell the roots down below to dig in deeper, wider, stronger. Like it literally, without that breeze of opposition blowing on the tree, and if it's just staked all of its life, it will never be able to withstand the oppression. It will fall over. As soon as you remove that stake, it's weak and it will lose. And you know what? This is literally what this world is trying to create: insulated people who have no capacity to stand up and resist. And this is why it's so contrasting for those of you that have deep convictions, for those of you that are filled with boldness and bravery, as you have conversations with people looking for those doors of opportunity to open up and talk about these things. It's creating in you the wherewithal to deal with somebody who disagrees with you, who doesn't tolerate your viewpoints and is hostile towards you. It's good for us to have those experiences. It's fantastic for us to have that. If we can train up another generation, if we can raise up our children with an understanding about the way the world really is, and throughout history, we are going to insulate them from this deceptive narratives of the dragon and the beast that he gives his power to. Because you literally read it, you guys, the whole world worships the dragon. That's why at the end of the day, I go out to try to preach and share with people the understanding of the dragon is a very real entity. We are really fighting in a flesh and blood struggle against immortals of absolute incredible power and capabilities. And you know what? We have an opportunity to study right now so that we can be equipped to contend in this great war of the ages. But if we neglect that, if we ignore that, if we don't hearken to the warnings of the prophets who have come before us and listen to them, who are calling us back to the ways of Yah, they're like, listen and obey him, follow his ways, like crying out over and over again, begging the people to return to their father, begging the people to return to his kingdom. And you know what? If you ignore that, you're going to get the fruit of it, which is your enemies are going to have power over you and destroy you. That's literally what happened. Joash is literally deceived to such a level by these other priests, by these other counselors, to where he goes in and takes Jehoiada's son, the guy who also was alongside of him, being raised up in his life, and he conspires with these monsters to have him murdered. And you know what? Yahuwah hates that. He hates that kind of stuff, but that's the fruit of it. That's the fruit of that kingdom. Back to Second Chronicles. This is why Yahuwah literally is like, okay, you're going to lose. Even though you have this big, powerful, awesome army, I'm going to make sure that these guys come in here and they're going to whoop your butt. They're going to make sure that you die. Listen to how he dies. Joash should have been like the most awesome story. 7-year-old king, just crushing life, crushing monsters. And then he's just, instead, this is literally where they left him. Verse 25. And when they had withdrawn from him, for they left him very sick, his own servants conspired against him because of the blood of the sons of Jehoiada the priest. And they killed him on his bed, and he died. And they buried him in the city of David. But they did not bury him in the burial sites of the sovereigns. And these are the ones who conspired against him: Zabad, the son of Shemath, the Ammonites, and Jehozabad, the son of Shimeroth, the Moabites. As to his sons and the many words about him, and the rebuilding of the house of Elohim, see, they are written in the commentary of the book of the sovereigns. And Amatziyahu, his son, reigned in his place. You see what a tragedy that turned into? This is why you guys will see conspirators behind the scenes working all the time to destroy the children of Yah. The enemy has his agents placed in these positions of power all the time, you guys. And so you must understand, it is no different than what Yeshua dealt with, you guys. If you turn over with me, listen to this. Let's go over here to John. Let's go to John 16. These words, Yeshua is gathered with all of his apostles here for a second. For context, you're going to hear him hit on that ruler of the world, the dragon. He's going to address him here because fundamentally this was his hour. This was the more opportune time. Remember when the devil went after him in the wilderness for 40 days, testing him, trying him, tempting him. For 40 days, he resisted him. And then there's this moment where it says that the devil went away waiting for a more opportune time. That more opportune time is literally right here. These words I've spoken to you so that you do not stumble. They shall put some of you out of the congregations, but an hour is coming when everyone who kills you shall think he's rendering service to Elohim. And this they shall do to you, because they did not know the Father nor me. But I've said these words to you so that when the hour comes, you remember that I told them to you. And these words I did not say to you at the beginning, for I was with you. But now I go away to him who sent me. And not one of you asked me, where are you going? But because I've said these words to you, grief has filled your heart. But I say the truth to you. It's better for you that I go away. For if I do not go away, the Helper shall not come to you at all. But if I go, I shall send him to you. And having come, he shall convict the world concerning sin, and concerning righteousness, and concerning judgment, concerning sin, because they do not believe in me, concerning righteousness, because I go to my Father, and you see me no more, concerning judgment, because the ruler of this world is judged. I still have many words to say to you, but you are not able to bear them now. But when he comes, the Spirit of truth, he shall guide you into all the truth. For he shall not speak from himself, but whatever he hears, he shall speak, and he shall announce to you what is to come. He shall esteem me, for he shall take of what is mine and announce it to you. All that the Father has is mine. That is why I've said that he takes from what is mine and announces it to you. A little while and you do not see me, and again a little while and you shall see me. Therefore some of his taught ones said to one another, what is this that he says to us? A little while and you do not see me, and again a little while and you shall see me. And because I'm going to the Father? So they said, what is this that he says, a little while? We don't know what he's saying. Yeshua therefore knew they were wishing to ask him, and he said to one of them, are you still asking one another about what I said? A little while and you do not see me, and again a little while you shall see me? Truly I say to you that you shall weep and lament, but the world shall rejoice, and you shall be grieved, but your grief shall become joy. The woman has grief when she's in labor, because her hour has come. But as soon as she has given birth to the child, she no longer remembers the affliction for joy that a man was born into the world. And you therefore have grief now, but I shall see you again, and your heart shall rejoice, and no one takes your joy away from you. Man, is that not the case? My wife and I watched her go through so much groaning and grief over days. Like on day 2, she had a really panicky feeling. A lot of fear came over her, like agony and exhaustion. She was already so weak and so sick from the toxicity in her body, and her liver had shut down and her pancreas had shut down, and she could not metabolize fats at all. And so she just withered away completely. And so she was so weak and so exhausted, and she was so scared. And there's these small moments in life where you do question your decisions. That was one of those moments where we began to question, and she began to question, should we have a midwife here? Should I go to the hospital? What are we doing? Like all these fears came over her in just this waves of this dread happened. And it was this moment of decision for her. And, we're like, we support you. We had our friend Jennifer, who was there with us at the time, helping us out. And you know what? We prayed with her. We prayed with her. We asked the Father to give us peace and to lead us to make a good decision here, because we don't want to be foolish. We're not completely against trying to get help if that's what's needed, But there was this just moment where we just desperately cried out to him to help us in this moment, to help us to have the ability to persevere, for her body to move along, because the pain was just so, she just gotten so uncomfortable. The baby had descended, but just wasn't coming all the way through. And she was just in agony and just groaning, And then if you just could stop that moment and see how this just wave of peace came over her and the strength came over her, and she was able to just relax. and she was just at peace again. And it was just like so much life came back to her, and to go from that moment though to after the birth and being able to sit there and hold her twins in her arms, and for her finally having like a deep understanding of why her labor had been so bad, why her pregnancy had been so brutal. Like she finally felt vindicated and understanding for all of these moments, like the joy that came over her then with seeing these babies alive, both of them healthy and strong. Like full term twins is so rare, like the major approach in the medical community is to induce labor. But she, to carry those babies to the fullness of their life, like she got to rejoice. She got to rejoice. And you know what? There is a lot of people who are literally going to rejoice with that level of rejoicing as they go in and seek to kill and blot out everyone who's got convictions and belief in Yahuwah. Like we just read, for when the whole world is deceived, they go after the remaining remnant. They go after all of the righteous leftovers who have not compromised and have not been led astray. They go after and seek to kill them all and butcher them all. And they think they're doing it for the right reasons. And you know what? This joy and the grief that people are going to experience during that day, you know what? It may be short-lived, because the grief, the joy is inevitable. I was talking to one of my friends the other day, and he said, even if they come down and they kill us, I'm going to rejoice in that hour, because you know what? I get to say I am coming back. This isn't the end for me. And you may kill my life now, but you know what? My life doesn't end here. I am born. I get to be born again. That's the true, like the second death is the big one, you guys. The first death is nothing. The second death, the final death, is the big one. If you survive that and you're raised to life forever, what a sweet joy that will ultimately be. And the Messiah is trying to comfort his apostles in knowing that, listen, you're going to get to see me go through the first death, and it's going to be awful. It's going to be horrific. It's going to be worse than anything you never even imagined, so bad. You know what? But the joy that they get to experience afterwards, what sweet relief. And in verse 23, and in that day you shall ask me none at all. Truly, truly, I say to you, whatever you ask the Father in my name, he shall give you. Until now you have asked nothing in my name. Ask and you shall receive, in order that your joy might be complete. These words I've spoken to you in figures of speech, but an hour is coming when I shall no longer speak to you in figures of speech, but I shall declare the Father plainly to you. In that day you shall ask in my name, and I do not say to you that I shall pray the Father on your behalf, for the Father himself does love you, because you have loved me and have believed that I came forth from Elohim. I came forth from the Father and have come into the world again. I leave the world and go to the Father. His taught one said to him, see, now you're speaking plainly and not using a figure of speech. Now we know that you know all and have no need that anyone should question you. By this we believe that you came forth from Elohim. Yeshua answered them and said, do you now believe? See, an hour is coming and now has come, that you are scattered, each to his own, and leave me alone. Yet I'm not alone, because the Father is with me. These words I've spoken to you, that in me you might have peace. In the world you have pressure, but take courage, for I have overcome the world. May each of you that's experiencing that pressure take courage, because you know what? Yeshua has overcome the world. He has overcome every level of deception, and he's offering to each and every one of you the helper, his set-apart spirit, to come alongside you and empower you to be able to differentiate between truth and falsehood. And you know what? That's the promise that we get, that seal of his set-apart spirit upon our lives. That's evidence of his spirit active in us, the fruits of the spirit. Like, go read Galatians. Go read the book Galatians in chapter 5, and you get to see the fruits of the kingdom of darkness and the fruits of the kingdom of Yah. And I say to you, this is verse 16 in chapter 5, walk in the Spirit, and you shall not accomplish the lust of the flesh. For the flesh lusts against the Spirit, and the Spirit against the flesh. And these are opposed to each other, so that you do not do what you desire to do. This is the ultimate war of the ages, you guys, right here in our flesh. This is the house of Yahuwah that's got the idols that are trying to creep in and that we're trying to purge out all the time. And the works of the flesh are well known, which are these: adultery, whoring, uncleanness, indecency, idolatry, drug sorcery, hatred, quarrels, jealousies, fits of rage, selfish ambitions, dissensions, factions, envy, murders, drunkenness, wild parties, and the like, of which I forewarn you, even as I also said before, that those who practice such as these shall not inherit the reign of Elohim. But the fruit of the Spirit is love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, trustworthiness, gentleness, self-control. Against such there is no Torah. And those who are of Messiah have impaled the flesh with its passion and the desires. If we live in the Spirit, let us also walk in the Spirit. Let us not become conceited, provoking one another or envying one another. This is the promise of the good fruits that can come into our life as we turn towards Him and we begin to regard His words. Let's carry on. This is one of the most powerful chapters you guys can ever read when you want to see how the Messiah prayed. I know people go over the Lord's Prayer, as it's called, our Father who is in heaven, blessed be your name, all that stuff. Like that prayer is an awesome prayer. But understand something here. Here is a prayer of literally preeminent power, in my opinion. To me, this is the Messiah's prayer, the Lord's Prayer, demonstrated for us in such a profound and powerful way. Check this out, chapter 17. Yeshua said these words and lifted up his eyes to the heaven and said, Father, the hour has come. Esteem your Son so that your Son also might esteem you, as you have given him authority over all flesh, that he should give everlasting life to all whom you have given him. And this is everlasting life, that they should know you, the only true Elohim, and Yeshua Messiah whom you have sent. I have esteemed you on the earth, having accomplished the work you have given me that I should do. Now esteem me with yourself, Father, with the esteem which I had with you before the world was. And I've revealed your name to the men whom you gave me out of the world. They were yours, and you gave them to me, and they have guarded your word. Now they've come to know all that you gave to me. It is from you, because the words which you gave to me, I have given them, and they have received them, and have truly known that I came forth from you. They believed that you sent me. I pray for them. I do not pray for the world, but for those whom you have given me, for they are yours, and all mine are yours, and yours are mine, and I have been esteemed in them. And I am no more in the world, but these are in the world, and I come to you, set apart Father. Guard them in your name which you have given me, so that they might be one as we are. When I was with them in the world, I was guarding them in your name, which you have given me, and I watched over them, and not one of them perished, except the son of destruction, that the scripture might be fulfilled. And now I come to you, and I speak these words in the world, so that they might have my joy completed in them. I've given them your word, and the world hated them, because they are not of the world, as I am not of the world. I do not pray that you should take them out of the world, but that you keep them from the wicked one. They are not of the world, as I am not of the world. Set them apart in your truth. Your word is truth. As you sent me into the world, I also sent them into the world. And for them, I set myself apart, so that they too might be set apart in truth. I do not pray for these alone, but also for those believing in me through the word, so that they all might be one as you, Father, are in me, and I in you, so that they too might be one in us, so that the world might believe that you have sent me. In the esteem which you gave me, I have given them, so that they might be one as we are one, I in them and you in me, so that they might be perfected into one, that the world knows that you have sent me and have loved them as you've loved me. Father, I desire that those whom you have given me might be with me where I am, so that they see my esteem which you have given me, because you loved me before the foundations of the world. Oh, righteous Father, indeed the world did not know you, but I knew you, and these knew you that sent me. And I have made your name known to them, and shall make it known, so that the love with which you loved me might be in them, and I in them. Do you get to see the love that the Messiah had for his brothers right here? Do you get to see the love that they had and he had for the word, for Yahweh's name, for his glory, for his esteem? You get to see what was preeminent of importance, the unity that Yahweh wanted, that Yeshua came to bring about, the fulfillment of true unity. This is why all of these people who have this idea of a utopianism, like the desire in them to see a world that is at peace, is good. The desire to see a world that people dwell in unity is good. That's what Yahweh wants for us. But you know what? We are wrestling against a power, a principle, a brilliance that wants to keep people adversarial, that wants to destroy people's unity, and it wants to keep us from the most important unity we can ever had with the Father and his Son and the power of his set apart Spirit. Everything in this world is to keep us from those things, from loving his word and loving his name. That's why you guys, like, I love to use his name. I'm not, if you guys know, I'm not dogmatic about it. I'm not like tyrannically attacking people that aren't using it. I just found his name is, I literally didn't know his name. I didn't know his name. All I grew up with all my life was his titles. And like that's what I knew him as. I didn't understand his name. And when I did, it taught me more about his character. It began to give me a better understanding of who he was and who his son was. When I began to get a differentiation between just God, generic, and Yahuwah, like I understood suddenly an intimacy about him that I just didn't have before that. It gave me specificity in my relationship, like a uniqueness. It's the difference between when I call my wife honey and Chelsea. Like there's a specificity to it. I know her, who she is, Chelsea. Like I, in my mind, can go to the moments to me that are the most important things of when I saw my wife truly being my bride. Like it was very little from our wedding. Do you understand? The world puts all the preeminence for girls on their wedding day, and it's totally nonsense. That's not the most important moment. The most important moments are the difficult ones. When you're at year 6 or 7 and it's so hard and exhausting. Like when you guys don't like each other and you're frustrated with each other and annoyed at each other and ticked off at each other and you're fighting and frustrated. Like these are the moments of true like relational covenant. Those are the moments of like stick to itness. That's the way I like to say it. Like the grittiness of life. My wife and I's best moments have come through those gritty moments when we were strained and exhausted and depleted. And you know what? I was the very wounded, broken one for many years of our marriage. For much more of it, I have been the busted up one than she has. I've had a lot more nights where I'm not okay than she has. She's rarely the nurse. I'm rarely the nurse to her. That's changed over the last year and a half. I have had to take care of a woman with chronic sickness that I've never had to do before, but she's been taking care of me for a long time. And you know what? Those are the things that are most important to me, is when we have the reciprocity between each other to care for each other's needs. And this is why marriage is supposed to be the demonstration of that to the world. Like our marriages are supposed to be the testimony to the nations about our relationship with our Father. And that's why they're so targeted. That's why they've given us such a demeaning version of marriage in the entertainment and in the world. They show us marriage as this meaningless thing. This covenant is nothing when it's everything. Like you give your children the stability of a marriage that goes through all the highs and lows. You know what? You're building in them the strength to resist those winds of opposition. And you know what? I can remember these moments with my wife and I. And to me, they are the treasures that I can't lose heart of. Like our unity is something that's not breakable because Yahuwah has sealed it. He is the one who is with us and together in this moment. And you know what? That's what the Messiah is trying to describe to people. He's wanting them to have that level of intimacy with him and his Father and his word. Like he's like, this is the culmination of my ministry on this earth, is to try to unite the nations back to you, is to gather up those scattered and lost sheep of the house of Israel, to bring them back to the seed of Abraham. Like it says in Galatians 4 right there, he who is in Messiah is the seed of Abraham. Like that's ultimately where the whole thing is designed to go. We're not disconnected from the nation of Israel, you guys. If you want to be a believer in the Messiah, you get to be a part of the nation of Israel. That's it. Chapter 3, verse 29. And if you are of Messiah, then you are, let me go back one more. For there is not Yahudi nor Greek, there's not slave nor free, there's not male and female, for you are all one in Messiah Yeshua. And if you are of Messiah, then you are of the seed of Abraham and heirs according to the promise. That's the unity that he wants us to have. That's that single tree of Israel that all of us are trying to be grafted upon. And you know what? That came because of what the Messiah did, because he laid down his life and gave himself up. He gave us the ability to have that moment. And you know what? This is that story right here. Let's read John 18. And having said these words, Yeshua went out with his taught ones beyond Kidron torrent, where there was a garden, into which he and his taught ones entered. And Yehuda, who delivered him up, also knew the place, because Yeshua often went there. Yehuda then, having received the company of soldiers and officers from the chief priests and Pharisees, came there with lanterns and torches and weapons. Yeshua then, knowing all that would come upon him, went forward and said to them, "Whom do you seek?" And they answered him, "Yeshua of Nazareth." Yeshua said to them, "I am." And Yehuda, who delivered him up, was also standing with them. When therefore he said to them, "I am," he drew back and fell to the ground. Powerful words, you guys. Once more he asked them, "Whom do you seek?" And they said, "Yeshua of Nazareth." Yeshua answered and said, "I said to you that I am. If then you seek me, allow these to go, in order that the word might be filled which he spoke of. Those of whom you have given me, I have lost none." Then Shimon Kepha, having a sword, drew it and struck the high priest's servant and cut off his right ear. And the servant's name was Malek. Then Yeshua said to Kepha, "Put your sword into the sheath. Shall I not drink the cup which my Father has given me?" Some of you guys might miss this, but in the story here, it's really important to understand. When Peter, Kepha, cuts off the ear of the high priest's servant, this guy is permanently maimed. And part of the requirements in the Torah is that a man who is maimed can never enter the tabernacle, never enter the temple. So this would have literally cut off this man's ability to ever go into the house of Yehuda. Like somebody who's a leper also cannot go in, right? That's the next chapter in Second Chronicles that takes place. Like Yahweh strikes a man with the king with leprosy, so he can never go back into the house of Yahuwah. This man literally would have been cut off from that. But you see, even here, Yeshua restores it. Listen, he put this why this is why when he healed him, it was such a powerful moment, because he still allowed that man the ability to be able to be a part of that ministry. Then the company of soldiers. Oh, let me go back. Sorry. Then Yeshua said to Kepha, "Put your sword into the sheath. Shall I not drink the cup which my father's given me?" Then the company of soldiers and the commander and the officers of the Yahudim seized Yeshua and bound him. And they led him away to Hanan first, for he was the father-in-law of Caiaphas, who was the high priest that year. Now Caiaphas was the one who gave counsel to the Yahudim that was better that one man should die for the people. And Shimon Kepha followed Yeshua with another taught one. And that taught one was known to the high priest and went with Yeshua into the courtyard of the high priest. But Kepha was standing outside the door. So the other taught one, who was known to the high priest, went out and spoke to her who kept the door and brought in Kepha. Then the servant girl who kept the door said to Kepha, "Are you also one of his man's taught ones?" And he said, "I am not." And the servants and the officers who made a fire of coals stood there because it was cold, and they warmed themselves. Kepha was standing with them and warming himself. Then the high priest asked Yeshua about his taught ones and his teaching. Yeshua answered him, "I spoke openly to the world. I have always taught in the congregation and in the set-apart place where the Yahudim always meet, and I spoke no word in secret. Why do you ask me? Ask those who have heard me what I said to them. See, they know what I said." When he had said this, one of the officers who stood by slapped Yeshua in the face, saying, "Do you answer the high priest this way?" Yeshua answered him, "If I have spoken evilly, bear witness of the evil. But if well, why do you strike me?" Then Hanan sent him bound to the high priest Caiaphas. Then Shimon Kepha was standing and warming himself. And they said to him, "Are you also one of his taught ones?" He denied it and said, "I am not." One of the servants of the high priest, a relative of the one whose ear Kepha cut off, said to him, "Did I not see you in the garden with him?" Then Caiaphas again denied it. Immediately a cock crowed. Then they led Yeshua from Caiaphas to the palace, and it was early. And they themselves did not go into the palace, lest they should be defiled, but that they might eat the Pesach. Pilate therefore came out to them and said, "What accusation do you bring against this man?" They answered and said, "If he were not an evildoer, would we not have delivered him up to you?" Then Pilate said to them, "You take him and judge him according to your law." The Yahudim said, "It is not right for us to put anyone to death," in order that the word of Yahushua might be filled, which he spoke, signifying by what death he was about to die. Then Pilate went back into the palace and called Yeshua and said to him, "Are you the sovereign of the Yahudim?" Yeshua answered and said, "Do you say this from yourself, or did others talk to you about me?" Pilate answered, "Am I a Yahudi? Your own nation and the chief priests have delivered you to me. What did you do?" Yeshua answered, "My reign is not of this world. If my reign were of this world, my servants would fight, so that I should not be delivered to the Yahudim. But now my reign is not from here." Then Pilate said to them, "You are the sovereign then." Yeshua answered, "You say it, because I am a sovereign. For this I was born. For this I have come into the world, that I should bear witness to the truth. Everyone who is of the truth hears my voice." Then Pilate said to him, "What is truth?" And when he had said this, he went out again to the Yahudim and said to them, "I find no guilt in him." Let me just pause for a second, you guys. That statement, "what is truth," is the sad reality of what the people in our society cannot answer the question to today. They are so confused. They're so confused. I sat in a classroom on this, at this organic growers school in a couple weeks ago, and it was a class on foraging, right? And I was like, "Oh, it's going to be about foraging." It was totally not about foraging. It was all this philosophical discussion on everything from politics to all kinds of ideologies that are just ridiculous, right? And all these people that were asking questions, the fundamental basis of what all of them were asking is they were wrestling through these philosophical arguments and ideas about culture and laws and boundaries and absolutes and morality. All of them lacked a basic guideline. They were so lost. They literally had no idea about what is truth. And it was like embraced collectively as understood that like we couldn't define anything specifically because everything was relative. And it was one of the saddest experiences I've ever had in my life because it's been a while since I sat in a kind of college age-ish group classroom. And I was just like, this is unreal. This is unreal how lost people are, how lost they are because they literally don't know the basis of truth. Like his word is truth. This is the fundamental basis to life. And if you deviate from that, you're lost. You're lost because you can't define things. You can't make a basis of reality. Like truth is reality. That's literally a better way of saying it is what is reality? That's Pilate's question in life. Here he is a sovereign, should be a king, should have a better understanding of what is reality. He doesn't even know basic reality. This is something never to lose sight of, you guys. Our friends, our neighbors, our enemies are very lost. They're very confused. And you must remember, this is why it's so powerful for you to arm yourself with the truth so that you can be a force of contrast in their life, to give them the alternative, to give them an option that's got a firm foundation that they can literally set their life upon. Let's carry on here. In 38, Pilate said to him, "What is truth?" And when he had said this, he went out again to the Yahudim and said, "I find no guilt in him. But you have a habit that I shall release someone to you at the Pesach. Do you wish then that I release to you the sovereign of the Yahudim?" Then they all shouted again, saying, "Not this one, but Barabbas." And Barabbas was a robber. Then therefore, Pilate took Yeshua and flogged him. And the soldiers plaited a crown of thorns and placed it on his head. And they put a purple robe on him and came to him and said, "Greetings, sovereign of the Yahudim." And they slapped him in the face. And Pilate went outside again and said to them, "See, I am bringing him out to you to let you know that I find no guilt in him." Then Yeshua came outside wearing the crown of thorns and the purple robe. And Pilate said to them, "See the man." So when the chief priests and the officers saw him, they shouted, saying, "Impale! Impale!" Pilate said to them, "You take him and impale him, for I find no guilt in him." The Yahudim answered him, "We have a law, and according to our law he ought to die, for he has made himself the son of Elohim." So when Pilate heard these words, he was more afraid and went back into his palace, and asked Yeshua, "Where are you from?" But Yeshua gave him no answer. Then Pilate said to him, "Do you not speak to me? Do you not know that I possess authority to impale you, and I possess authority to release you?" Yeshua answered and said, "You would have no authority against me if it were not given to you from above. Because of this, He who delivered me to you has a greater sin." From then on, Pilate was seeking to release him, but the Yahudim shouted, saying, "If you release this one, you are not Caesar's friend. Everyone who makes himself a sovereign does speak against Caesar." Therefore, when Pilate heard these words, he brought Yeshua out and sat down in the judgment seat in a place that's called Pavement, but in Hebrew, Gabbatha. And it was the preparation day of the Pesach week. And about the 6th hour, he said to the Yahudim, "See your sovereign." But they shouted, "Away, away, impale him." Pilate said to them, "Shall I impale your sovereign?" The chief priest answered, "We have no sovereign except Caesar." Listen, this is fundamentally why the Jews, like the Yahudim, and the people that are complicit in this other earthly agenda of destruction and violence and coercion and subterfuge, they're subject to the Roman Catholics. Understand, they put themselves under the sovereign authority of Caesar, of Rome, and their fidelity is still subject to him. That's why I'm always trying to point people towards the greater head of the dragon. There's like 10 heads of the dragon. That's one of them. But understand, like, they come from the body of the great whore fundamentally. And that's why they're still puppets in the hand of the puppeteer masters that sit at Vatican City and the papal dynasties. This is because they literally put themselves, instead of having no sovereign but Yahuwah, this is the fulfillment of the book of Judges, where they're like, "We have no sovereign over us, and every man does what's right in his own eyes." Now they literally are like, "No, we have no sovereign except Caesar. Rome is our God." And this is literally what they put themselves under subjection to, and they still are to this day. They literally said, "Let the blood of this man be on us and our children forever." And they're reaping it. And at that time, he delivered him to them to be impaled. And they took Yeshua and led him away. And bearing his stake, he went out to the so-called place of the skull, which is called in Hebrew Golgotha, where they impaled him, and 2 others with him, one on this side and one on that side, and Yeshua in the middle. And Pilate wrote a title too and put it on the stake, and it was written, "Yeshua of Nazareth, the sovereign of the Yahudim." Many of the Yahudim therefore read this title, for the place where Yeshua was impaled was near the city, and it was written in Hebrew, in Greek, and in Roman. So the chief priests of the Yahudim said to Pilate, "Do not write the sovereign of the Yahudim." But he said, "I am sovereign of the Yahudim." Pilate answered and said, "What I have written, I have written." Then the soldiers, when they had impaled Yeshua, took his outer garments and made 4 parts, to each soldier a part in the inner garment. But the inner garment was without seam, woven from the top in one piece. So they said to each other, "Let us not tear it, but cast lots for it, whose it shall be, in order that the scripture might be fulfilled, which said, 'They divided my garments among them, and for my clothing they cast lots.'" The soldiers therefore indeed did this. And by the stake of Yeshua stood his mother and his mother's sister Miriam, the wife of Clopas, and Miriam from Magdala. Then Yeshua, seeing his mother and the taught one whom he loved standing by, he said to his mother, "Woman, see your son." Then the taught one said, "See your mother." And from that hour the taught one took her to his own home. After this, Yeshua, knowing that all had been accomplished, in order that the scripture might be accomplished, said, "I thirst." And a bowl of sour wine stood there, and they filled a sponge with sour wine, put it on hyssop, and held it to his mouth. So when Yeshua took the sour wine, he said, "It has been accomplished." And bowing his head, he gave up his spirit. Therefore, since it was the preparation day, that the body should not remain on the stake on the Sabbath, for that Sabbath was a high one, the Yahudim asked Pilate to have their legs broken and that they be taken away. Therefore the soldiers came and broke the legs of the first and the other who was impaled with him. But when they came to Yeshua, they saw that he was already dead. They did not break his legs. But one of the soldiers pierced his side with a spear, and instantly blood and water came out. And he who has seen has witnessed, and his witness is true. And he knows that he's speaking the truth in order that you might believe. For this took place in order for the scripture to be filled. Not one of his bones shall be broken. And again, another scripture says, "They shall look on him whom they've pierced." And after this, Joseph of Ramathaim, being a taught one of Yeshua, but secretly for fear of the Yahudim, asked Pilate that he might take the body of Yeshua, and Pilate gave permission. Therefore he came and took the body of Yeshua. And Nicodemus, who at first came to Yeshua by night, also came, bringing a mixture of myrrh and aloes, about 100 pounds. Then they took the body of Yeshua and bound it in linen wrappings with the spices, as was the habit of the Yahudim for burial. And at that place where he was impaled, there was a garden, and in the garden a fresh tomb which no man had yet been put in. Then then, because of the preparation day of the Yahudim, they laid Yeshua, because the tomb was near. And on day 1 of the week, Miriam from Magdala came early to the tomb while it was still dark. Pause for a second. This is why your sunrise services, you guys, are literally rooted in Babylon. There is no Sunday sunrise service in the scriptures. Yeshua resurrected while it was still dark. Please understand something. These people would bow and face the sun. Read Ezekiel 8:9. That's where you get that tradition from. This is the same Luciferian practices that have been going on forever. It's just, you open up doors to the immortals, like rulership over your life when you go and participate in this stuff, even unknowingly. Like, understand, that's one of those traditions of men that you inherit. 3 days and 3 nights doesn't go from Good Friday to Good Sunday. It's not reality. Palm Sunday is not like, please understand. There's these illusions of traditions that you've inherited that are not accurate, because 3 days and 3 nights will never get you there. It's also early in the morning. It's nighttime. And she saw that the stone had been removed from the tomb. So she ran and came to Shimon Kepha and to the other taught one whom Yeshua loved, and said to them, "They have taken the master out of the tomb. We do not know where they laid him." Then Kepha and the other taught one went out, and they were going to the tomb. And the two were running together, but the other taught one outran Kepha and came to the tomb first. And stooping down, he saw the linen wrappings lying, but he did not go in. Then Shimon Kepha came, following him, and went into the tomb. And he saw the linen wrappings lying, and the cloth which had been on his head, not lying with the linen wrappings, but folded up by itself. So then the other taught one who came to the tomb first also went in, and he saw and believed. For they did not yet know the scripture that he had to rise again from the dead. Therefore the taught ones went away again by themselves. But Miriam was standing outside the tomb, weeping. Then as she wept, she stooped down to the tomb and saw 2 messengers in white sitting, one at the head and the other at the feet, where the body of Yeshua had been. And they said to her, "Woman, why do you weep?" She said, "Because they took my master away, and I do not know where they laid him." And having said this, she turned around and saw Yeshua standing, but she did not know that it was Yeshua. Yeshua said to her, "Woman, why do you weep? Whom do you seek?" Thinking he was the gardener, she said to him, "Master, if you've carried him away, say to me where you put him, and I shall take him away." Yeshua said to her, "Miriam." She turned and said to him, "Rabboni," which means teacher. Yeshua said to her, "Do not hold on to me, for I have not yet ascended to my Father. But go to my brothers and say to them, I am ascending to my Father and your Father, and to my Elohim and your Elohim." Miriam from Magdala came, announcing to the taught ones that she had seen the Master, and that he told her this. When therefore it was evening on the day 1 of the week, and when the doors were shut where the taught ones met for fear of the Yahudim, Yeshua came and stood in their midst and said to them, "Peace to you." And having said this, he showed them his hands and his side. The taught ones therefore rejoiced when they saw the Master. Then Yeshua said to them, "Peace to you. As the Father has sent me, I also send you." And having said this, he breathed on them and said, "Receive the set-apart Spirit. If you forgive the sins of any, they are forgiven them. If you retain the sins of any, they have been retained." Man, can I just say, what a moment. What a beautiful, incredible moment of relief and joy for them to have got to see and experience. Like, this is their witness. This is their testimony. These are the things that took place in their life that they saw and they chronicled for us and they've written down for us so that our joy might be complete. So those of you that are experiencing these horrible sufferings and the oppression and the persecutions, understand your joy will be complete through that. It is good for us to experience these things. And I pray that the Father will bring deliverance into your life, that you would get to see the powerful miracle of the resurrection again. This story should be one that you guys read often. You should read it often, not just at the Passover, but understand this is one of those triumphant stories, these miracles that we must never lose heart of, because this is why the set apart spirit is supposed to be working and operating in our life to bring to remembrance everything he said. This is the fruit of his incredible kingdom that can come to life. These men that labored alongside the Messiah, they got to see the miracle of him standing in front of them. And you know what? At the end of the day, that's all of our goals. Our goal is to faithfully endure until the end because we want to receive the crown of life. I want you to receive the crown of life. I want those who are lost and perishing to know that we have a great high priest who has built a bridge for us to come back to the Creator. And you know what? It's through faith in his resurrection. It's through belief that he died and yet he lives. And you know what? Because of that, our relationship to the Father has once again been offered and extended to us. We can be grafted in with him. We can be written in that Lamb's book of life. And you know what? That's where I want to be written. I want to be written in his book of life. I want to be found in his, written in the book of remembrance. Here's another book that you guys want to be written into. The Lamb's book of life is just one of those books, right? This is in Malachi chapter 3. And verse 16, then shall those who fear Yahuwah speak to one another, and Yahuwah listens and hears, and a book of remembrance being written before him of those who fear Yahuwah and those who think upon his name. And they shall be mine, said Yahuwah of hosts, on the day that I prepare a treasured possession, and I shall spare them as a man spares his own son who serves him. Then you will again see the difference between the righteous and the wrong, between the one who serves Elohim and the one who does not serve him. For look, the day shall come, burning like a furnace, and all the proud and every wrongdoer shall be stubble. And on that day shall burn them up, said Yahweh of hosts, which leaves to them neither root nor branch. But to you who fear my name, the Son of Righteousness shall arise with healing in his wings. And you shall go out and leap for joy like calves from the stall. You shall trample the wrongdoers, for they shall be ashes under the soles of your feet. For on the day that I do this, said Yahweh of hosts, remember the Torah of Moshe, my servant, which I commanded him in Horeb, for all Yisrael, laws and right rulings. See, I am sending you Eliah, the prophet, before the coming of the great and awesome day of Yahuwah. And he shall turn the hearts of the fathers to the children, and the hearts of the children to their fathers, lest I come and strike the earth with utter destruction. You know what? My hope and my prayer, as always, is for you guys to remember, fathers, for you to turn towards your children, children, that you would turn towards your fathers, and that we would indeed all turn back towards our Father and fear his name, to fear him once more, to talk about him, so that our names could be written on his book of remembrance. We talk about his name. We talk about his character. We talk about his miracles, his testimonies. Share your testimonies, you guys. It's the most powerful thing you have, to remember the miracles of what he's done in your life. As small as you may think they are, they may be the very thing that the people around you in your life need to hear. They need to hear your stories. They need to hear what it's like to serve in his kingdom and to see the provision, the protection, the pain, the suffering, and the beauty of what living an authentic life can bring us. And by doing so, we can offer to others the alternative of life amidst a world of death. I love you guys so much. I really appreciate each and every one of you, and I look forward to another opportunity to talk to you guys again soon. Always appreciate hearing from you guys, whether it's in the comments or emails. You guys can always email me at snatchedfromtheflames@protonmail.com. I love you all so much. I'll talk to you soon.